Welcome to the Scalpel of Truth, the podcast providing cutting insight on how to rise to the top in the medical aesthetics industry with your host, Leisa Krause, aka the Bitch and Beautician. That's Leisa with an E, which stands for explicit, because in this surgical suite, she won't sugarcoat the truth, and yes, there will be some seriously salty language, not suitable for sensitive souls, children, nor pets. As a business consultant, Leisa shares the knowledge and lessons she's gleaned over 30 years in the industry. Time spent working directly with patients, managers, and med spa owners alike. Her practice growth strategies are sharp, her stories and wit sharper, and her panache for bringing the spice the sharpest. So buckle up, bichachos. Leisa is about to slice and dice another episode of The Scalpel of Truth.
Welcome to another episode of The Scalpel of Truth, where I dissect the realities of running a successful med spa without ever sugarcoating it. I'm your host, Leisa, aka the Bitch and Beautician, and today we are tackling a bit of a touchy subject with a little bit of a sharp edge. So we're talking about losing employees, whether they quit or they need to be fired, whatever the case. It is time to talk about the not so glamorous side of the business. You've got delivering Botox, fillers, lasers, selling product down to an art. How do you handle someone walking out of your practice or having to show someone the door without getting tangled up in the red tape? Here's the legal part I need to read. This podcast is presented solely for educational entertainment purposes. Guys, I'm just your beauty business bitch. I'm not a licensed therapist or an HR representative, nor am I a lawyer. This platform's used to share my experiences with what's made me a successful service provider, a manager, and a business consultant for those who I coach. Got it? Beautiful. Now, before we dive into this juicy topic, I have got some really exciting news. I actually have a special guest with me on the show today. I got several DMs after a spoof Instagram story was posted where a certain gentleman was launching his new fake copycat podcast called The Spatula of Honesty. If you missed this Instagram story, you might be a little bit lost right now, but you may also recognize this voice because it's the one that opens the show. It is the love of my life. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to the Chris Krueger. Welcome to the show, babe.
Thank you so much for having me, and welcome to the Scalpel of Truth podcast with your host, Leisa. That's Leisa with an E. It's E for explicit. This girl curses. Thank you for having me. And that was a very sweet and unnecessary introduction.
You stop. It's so funny. When you did that Instagram story, I had so many people messaging me that they would definitely tune into your fake podcast because you were so good. It was next level. And it's funny because I think people don't know, because I don't talk about you and the kids often on social media or things like that. I keep that part of my life a little bit more private. People don't know that you were actually an entertainer, an actor, and an MC by trade.
Yeah, I am a triple threat of, talent. Something. Yeah.
You are top talent.
I don't want to brag, but I am a legend in my own mind. And around the living room, I have the dog's respect about 37% of the time. So I feel like I'm killing it.
Are you making up percentages? Like, I feel like
I will tell you that 92% of all statistics are more believable with percentages.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go. That sounded very like you brought the authority there. So I hope you're going to do that for the rest of this show.
I'll give it a shot.
So let's jump into this. So first things first, what are some reasons that you think that top talent will leave the position that they're in a med spa?
I think right off the bat, lack of leadership in that would be micromanagement, lack of appreciation, and unclear communication. I think is probably, those are the three that are wrapped up in the lack of leadership. I think that there's always going to be the opportunity for better pay dangling out there, greener pastures out there. Talent might leave for that. I think the tricky one is when people are promised room for growth. I feel like that is so subjective. There's only so many positions to be had. There's only so many presidents to be had, so many VPs, so many managers. In any given small med spa, there's not a lot else you can do depending on what you're looking for.
Right. Well, and I completely agree. The other one that I think is there are a lot of med spas that have a massive lack of organization. So a lot of them are small, right? So small to medium accounts that are starting to grow or clinics that are starting to grow. And I think a lack of organization, that's why a lot of people will leave is like, oh my gosh, I had a laser tech message me not too long ago. And she said, here's where I am. I have, recently moved back to the area and I'm working at this place. This place is a shit show. Like they weren't paying her on time. They weren't like, there was so much that was not good. I said to her, those things are red flags. And that's where somebody who is top talent will leave. So I do think there are quite a few reasons why top talent are leaving. I also think it's really important to have a clinic manual. And if you don't have one, please reach out because you need that immediately. And as well as contractual agreements and the business side of the business. I think there are so many med spas out there that are just winging it all willy-nilly and don't have that clear procedural policies. This is what we stand for. This is our brand. It's a little bit more lax and a little bit more casual.
Oh, absolutely. And if you don't have a policy for something, for topic X, you'll have to make it at some point because people test the waters.
Yeah.
Whether intentionally or not.
Top talent or not, right? So having that manual is your business playbook. It's basically your business Bible. It needs to be robust. It needs to cover off expectations of what is and isn't acceptable. I think that that's first and foremost. And then two, you need to know that like the back of your hand. Are you following what your company playbook is? And are you knowing what your contractual agreements say? So if there's the sense of somebody quitting, it's termination clauses and notice periods and severance. You need to know that shit inside and out of what your actions are. So let's talk documentation. A lot of clinics fail when it comes to doing write-ups and documentations and reprimands for employee performance. I know that you and I managed a med spa together where we were suspicious of somebody stealing. There was no write-ups. They were suspicious of this for quite some time. And having to deal with the fallout of that, it starts to become very tricky.
It's extremely tricky because there's no paperwork. There's no paper trail. You have to have accountability by not only the staff, but also the management. And so being able to go back and say, hey, this is a pattern. To be able to prove it's a pattern, you need to have that documentation in place.
Yes. So I think this is the nitty gritty stuff. So it is keeping records of missed days of work or patient complaints or targets they didn't hit, products they didn't sell, every protocol that they failed to follow. I mean, this isn't the sexy part of the business, but it certainly is essential. And so I think those written warnings, making sure that employee signs those too. And this is the stuff that's not comfortable. This is why in management and ownerships, I always say, it's great to be friendly. It's dangerous to be friends because that invites a casual aspect, right? Like
100%. There has to be that arm's length so you can have someone. I mean, time and time again over the years, you'll have people that say, I value critical feedback. And when they're given that critical feedback, all of a sudden shit goes sideways because they're like, well, what do you mean I did this wrong? How dare you? You told me that we were friends. Yeah, but we're not friends because there's a business that we're running here and we need to be professional. And so, yeah.
There's a boundary, right?
Absolutely. Those boundaries have to be there and you can be friendly, but don't be friends.
Yeah. I think, and it's hard because a lot of these med spas are, we're all a big family. And it's like, if you look at it, like half the people out there treat their family like shit.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. The other thing is performance improvement plans. I love these. If somebody is faltering and you do need to write them up, I feel like those performance reviews and SWOT analysis, there's so many different things that you can do to have the performance be better. So I think and unless their performance doesn't improve, then you're going from a PIP to a pink slip. So I think it's important that you cut those people out, machete factor if they're not working. I think it also will outline the issues and expected improvements within a timeline that you need to see the performance picked up by leaps and bounds. I think you need to meet regularly every week to 2 weeks to review that progress if you're going to put somebody on a PIP, which is the performance improvement plan. And I do think those can be successful. But like you said, there's people out there that are like not like any sort of feedback. They're like, I'm out of here. And it all depends on the delivery of that feedback too. I think that's important.
Definitely. I mean, you want to give whatever feedback you have to give, you want to give it with compassion. You don't know what someone else is going through at home necessarily.
Yeah.
You want to watch for people's mental health. You want to make sure your delivery is kind in the way that you're addressing the action, not the individual.
Yeah. And I think it can be delivered in a kind way and compassionate, but it also can be firm. Like no bullshit. Like we're not screwing around here, because I think that invites, again, lax behavior, room for people to start walking on you, or the tail starting to wag the dog, and all of a sudden you're in a hell of a mess. And then I get a phone call and it's like, Lise, can you come in and fire this staff member? And I'm like, I'd be delighted, because I'm not emotionally invested. I care about the bottom line of the business, and you have somebody that has a pair of eyes that is backed up that doesn't have those relationships. So I think being friends when you need to push comes to shove, I think it's very difficult. I've had to manage friends in the past. That's difficult as well. If you've got a friendship first, right?
Definitely. I mean, and I think that also, if that happens, there needs to be boundaries drawn.
Yeah.
You have those conversations when that becomes an issue of, hey, I'm going to start managing you. I hope that's okay. And if we need to take a step back from our friendship, or if the way our friendship is going to proceed, we need to not work together, that's okay. But making sure those boundaries are there so it isn't a double standard for that quote unquote friend versus the rest of the staff, because then that starts to get a little tricky and a little ugly and a little
toxic culture.
Toxic as well. Yeah.
Yeah. 100% agree. So the other thing I think it's important for people to know is there's so many resources out there for legal counsel, but there's very few folks from a lawyer perspective or a legal perspective, attorney perspective, if you're in the US. I feel like you need somebody who is specific to our industry. I know for Canada, I have got an amazing lawyer that I use. Her name is Tiffany. I absolutely love her. And we have worked together in the past. She is who I refer all of my clients to, because she is exceptional. She was in mergers and acquisitions, and she knows everything contractual agreements. So she is phenomenal. If you need somebody and you're in Canada, please reach out. And if you need somebody US, I will absolutely find somebody because I know enough good people that they will direct me in the right place for you. So the other thing is having that termination meeting. So you need to plan very carefully and have and not meeting with the person that you're firing, or meeting, you're doing a meeting for yourself or management together with ownership to make sure you've got things ready, and you're poop in a group, you're shit in a stack. You need a termination letter, a final paycheck. Be classy. Don't make them wait. Like you're wanting to be top tier management or owners yourselves, and have their termination letter ready, a final paycheck ready, the info on if you have any benefits, are those going to continue? I love what you said about being direct but compassionate. I think you need to also make sure that you are locking down the access they have to your book of business, because the other thing is people will walk off with, all the patients they've treated and promise the next company or laser establishment that they're going to go see and work for, they're going to say, oh, I have all these patients that are going to follow me. Listen very carefully if you think you're going to quit a business and take that book of business with you. There may be a non-compete clause that doesn't stand up, but I'll tell you what does stand up, and that's a non-solicit. So you better don't be an asshole. Don't try and take that book of business. Those aren't your patients, but make sure you lock down that book of business, because you want to protect the investment you've spent on growing your marketing, your advertising, and then maybe get back any company property.
Keys, laptops, any kind of identification, uniforms, things like that. And I think going back to what we were talking about as well with this, you don't want to fire. So hire slow, fire fast. You don't want to get to the point of all of the legal I need a lawyer because we've been in this shit show for 2.5 years now and it was terrible month 2. Like, use that probationary period. Use that initial 90 days, that initial 3 months to say, hey, if anything goes sideways in this first 3 months, we are going to wash our hands and both walk away unscathed, or relatively unscathed, I should say.
Yeah, because our industry is so small. It's crazy incestuous. Everybody knows everybody. You're going to run into people at conferences or, work together with somebody that maybe you worked at previously at another job. That is going to happen for sure. And I think I love what you said there about that 90-day probationary period. I love that. And if there's any red flags, it's no different than a relationship, a dating relationship, right? Like, I mean, you're on your best behavior in that 3 months. If you're seeing red flags in that first 3 months of behavior, that's likely not going to change, right? Like, that's the best they're going to be.
Oh, date 3. If you're on date 3, and that person across from you is chewing with their mouth open, not saying please and thank you, being rude to the waiter, like, that's who you're getting.
You're wrap this up.
You're not going to be like, oh, I bet by date 7, I can fix that. That person is going to be better. I'm going to help.
But we do have folks out there that are like that.
Very much so.
Lots of fixers, people fixers. You don't want to be that in your med spa practice, for sure. It's a dangerous place to be.
Well, and it's just, you don't have time for it. If you're really trying to cultivate an atmosphere of professionalism, of top tier, of excellence, you want to focus on that and not focus on the shitty 5% of people who are not carrying their own weight. And the other thing is, when you have a toxic team member, a toxic staff member, and you're like, when is the right time to let them go? There's never going to be a right time. Because I'll tell you right now, you don't want to sit and white knuckle it for the next 2 months. Like, we just got to get through the busy period. And then we'll be able to cover for that warm body. Because I'll tell you with that warm body, their work is already being taken care of by the rest of your staff. And they're resenting it every day they come to work. And they're like, yeah, that shit show is still working here. I can't believe they haven't been fired yet. I can't believe they're still showing up. This is ridiculous. We're doing their work. They're still getting a paycheck. It's unmotivating for everybody.
It is.
So it's never going to be the right time. If it's Christmas, that sucks. I'm sorry. If it needs to be done, it needs to be done.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a bad time. Oh, their kid is going to have braces. Oh, it's going to be spring break. Oh,
they're going through a divorce. It's and some behavior, if you talk about it, I think that's where that direct, honest, open communication comes from, that to know your team. Going back, I feel like being friendly is one thing. I think being friends is difficult when somebody is going through a difficult time, because then there is leniency. I'm not saying don't lead with compassion, right?
Definitely lead with kindness.
Lead with kindness, for sure. The other thing that I want to touch on is, if the person is going to file for unemployment or whatever, this is, again, going back to the mental health part and making sure that these folks are also okay, right? As much as I love to Miranda Priestley this shit, I love that. But we also need to be level-headed when it comes to if somebody's seeking out unemployment. You need to respond promptly and accurately for any inquiries that they may be, and be prepared, like we said, for that legal action just in case. So you want to have all your documents complete because you may need them. If you're up for it, I also think it's not bad to do a exit interview with somebody who is quitting. Maybe not somebody you're firing, obviously, but for somebody who is quitting, I think an exit interview, but that's where you also need to be prepared for the feedback. Because at the beginning of the episode, babe, you said where, people don't love feedback. And I'll tell you right now, I'm an Aries. I'm not a huge, unless that feedback is that you are leading a marching band for my efforts. If you think I did something that wasn't great, fucking keep it to yourself. I don't want to hear that, right? You know this about me, right? It's that kid gloves thing. But I think that doing an exit interview can provide valuable insights to maybe your management process.
Well, and knowing what those blind spots might be, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And that exit interview might provide some very great feedback of, oh shit, we didn't think of that. I didn't realize I was doing this. She didn't realize she was doing that. we can fix this because we don't want to lose great talent like yourself in the future.
Moving forward. Yeah. And I think too, some people, if they're pissed and they're over it and they've got a new job and they're leaving anyway, sometimes an exit interview can give you a serious eye-opening slap in the face that you may need if you don't know what's going on in your practice. That's the time where somebody's going to leave and be like, yeah, well, Stephanie's a thief and she's been stealing. And Cindy had sex with her husband in the back room and you didn't know. And like, so-and-so is doing treatments for free on people and booking them in for a bikini, but actually doing their upper lip, chin, underarms for free and taking cash for it. Like there's so much underbelly shit that goes on in our industry. You might actually get an earful and then you're going to be like, oh shit, I need to fire my entire team's got to go.
Or you might realize that your med spa feels like a revolving door of staff going in and out. And you're like, what is going on? How come I can't keep good people? What's going on? And you realize, oh, that single friend that you have, that you're like, that person just can't find someone. Seventh, eighth, ninth failed relationship. The common denominator is the friend. If your med spa has a revolving door of people coming in and out constantly, you got to take a look in the mirror. Make sure that you're doing your part to keep that good talent there.
Here's the thing. It's you, motherfucker.
Right? I mean, and maybe it isn't. And maybe you're just a victim of circumstance and bless your heart, you're going to get through this. You listen to the podcast. It's going to get better. Hang in there. You got this, champ.
I love it. So I think that we've covered a lot here. And I have to say, I absolutely love you being a guest. I think this is so fun. We talk about it all the time anyway. So having you on, I think the listeners are going to be jazzed to know a little bit more about you and, behind the voice of the opener of the show. So thank you so much for indulging in this. I appreciate you and everything that you brought to this episode.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And to all of my platinum tier listeners for the Spatula of Honesty, the fake podcast, I'm going to give you guys the behind the scenes of the Spatula of Honesty within the Scalpel of Truth podcast. Stay tuned for that. Never.
I love you.
Stay tuned for that. Never.
The 25th of Never is when your podcast is launching. So guys, thanks so much for tuning in to the Scalpel of Truth. I'm your host, Leisa, with Chris Krueger today, reminding you to stay sharp, stay focused and fabulous, and for tit's sake, keep those records immaculate just in case you need to let somebody go, machete factor style, from your practice. So much love. See you next time.
Just see things stay the way they are.
Mic check 1 2.
Yeah, actually, we should do mic check.
That's what I was wondering. Are we not doing a sound check?
We are definitely.
What, Peter? What kind of amateur night are we hosting here?
He's like, fuck, no kidding. He's like, I deal with her all the time. Okay, so let's check these mics and see how we are.
Check 1 2. How does it come on the level right there? Does it look like it's showing up hot? Does it look like it's showing up clean?
Well, I don't have an indicator.
Well,
so
we will.
Let's stop recording and test that out and see how it is.